How you doing? Welcome back for this segment here. My name is Don Christian. I'm a United States Air Force veteran, and I'm doing a series on the 18th Engineers Regiment and their participation in World War One. And I'm coming at it from a national perspective and the personal perspective, and the fact that my father was in World War One. My dad was born in 1896. I was born in 57. My dad was 60 when I was born. When he died, my mother gave me a photo album in a manila envelope. And in 2011, I discovered that my dad had been in World War One and left me 250 photographs. So after 10 years of research, I put this whole perspective. I've been looking for my dad. I knew nothing about my dad's participation in World War One. He was this old, scary guy that was really tough, and I just never knew him. So as part of my research in my previous video, I mentioned that each regiment did their own bit of research, and this is the book about the 18th Engineers Regiment. It tells the complete story. So I ended up republishing it, and with some pictures and what have you. But I want to start telling this story. Our government, getting into World War One, all that history is out there. I'm gonna dovetail and compress it a little bit. So by May of 1917, our government was Pershing was heading over to France and looking at possible port sites for construction and infrastructure to be built, and forestry engineers, quartermasters, the supply side, an infrastructure that's going to allow our troops to come over on troop ships and supply ships and move to the French front and be effective. So that's where we're at here. So as that is happening, my father's he's writing a letter to his boss at the West Pacific Railroad now, and he's talking about, hey, I want to go fight in the war, and will you save my job? And they can't guarantee that because, nothing's guaranteed in war. But they said that when you come back, you can certainly reapply. And that gets into his 50 years and his pension, and that's a whole other story I'm telling in another documentary about the history of the West Pacific Railroad. Fascinating stuff. So, all this consideration is being given to where do we build docks and ports and wharves and supply sheds and railroad tracks to connect everything. How's that going to happen, right? So what happens is they begin to put the call out for help. So the call for help spreads through the construction world across the nation. And in May, qualified volunteers to begin to assemble in 12 large cities from coast to coast. On the Pacific coast, groups of 18th men gathered in California, Oregon, and Washington, and they were joined by other men from Idaho, Utah, Nevada, and Arizona. Colonel J.B. Cavanaugh, he was the district engineer at Seattle when was assigned as the regimental commander of the 18th Engineers Regiment. They reported to San Francisco on May 12th. The regimental headquarters, used as the San Francisco recruiting office, was opened at 646 Market Street on May 12th. And Lieutenant Hugh Wiley, and there's a picture of him, this is Hugh Wiley. He was actually the one that helped get this book written, major component of that, began to interview prospective volunteers on this day. No medical officers were present, and approved applicants were requested to return later for physical exams. Dr. Clark Pawson reported for duty the following day and began medical exams of all the men who passed their preliminaries. The age limit was a flexible factor. Tom Cunning, with over 40 years of active experience in train service on the Santa Fe, gave his age as 28 and served as a highly useful member of B Company. You're going to see in a postcard that I'm going to show that my dad sent to his girlfriend that shows there's a guy there's got to be in his 50s. He's a pretty old looking guy. This is when they were getting their shots. So these men begin to muster from different areas in San Francisco, and they slowly make their way to American Lake. They slowly put together their companies. They're recruited from different areas, trying to keep friends together and what have you. And during the recruiting activities in San Francisco, enlisted members were housed in an empty hotel on Mason Street, vacated a short time earlier by order of the chief of police. So all those people were rousted out in order for these prospective enlisted men to have a place to stay as they were going through the enlistment process. Ghosts of former occupants visited us at night. Distant noises that sounded like voices could be heard, all mixed with the odor of cheap perfume. This was 1917 in Mason Street in San Francisco. To help our morale, we were entertained by the soft swish of scampering rats racing up and down the halls. The most welcome event in going to bed was looking forward to the first rays of the morning sun. So think about all these men coming over from all these different states, arriving in San Francisco. One can only imagine 1917 what the nightlife in San Francisco was like. The regiment was first known as the 8th Reserves Engineers. In June 1917, the name was changed to the 8th Reserve Engineers National Army, and on July 1917, its final designation was the 18th Engineers Regiment. By the end of June, the San Francisco recruiting office was closed, and the regiment was assembled as a unit in the mobilization camp at the National Guard grounds at American Lake, Camp Lewis in Washington. Tents were set up in a clearing surrounded by pine trees and not far from the lake. Looking down the company streets amid the distant clouds, we could catch glimpses of snow-covered Mount Rainier, an inspiring sight. Company A, row of tents, was on the east side of the clearing, Company F and headquarters on the west side, a short wait from the lake and the most desirable location. So as they're getting their, as they're arriving and getting set up there, I'm going to now start running through some photographs here of my father's journey through American Lake. So stand by.